Misinformation, disinformation, this information ain't true. Says who? Who has the monopoly on lying? Is it the powerful or is it you? Who should be arrested for tweets and posts? Is it the government or is it you? Hello there, you 5.8 million awakening wonders. Look at how we're growing. Look how you're growing as an individual. Well done for overcoming the things that you've overcome. Well done. I know it's been challenging. I know what it's like out there. My life's got easier lately, and that's primarily because of you. But I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to suffer. I know what it's like to feel like you're not good enough. I know what it's like to feel frustrated in the face of monolithic power that you can't have any impact on, that seems like it's trying to crush the soul right out of you. I've been there. I know I'll probably be there again. And when I'm next there, I'll be there with you. Unified, we have a power that individually we don't have. And I think that might be the message of Guardians of the Galaxy, the bit where they all hold hands. I watched it yesterday. Seems to be the message. Listen, I had a wonderful conversation with the journalist Matt Taibbi about censorship, misinformation and disinformation. He presented me with a fantastic idea that the government and the mainstream media have a monopoly on lying. There are countless examples of misinformation and disinformation that they've done. For example, just think about the whole way the pandemic narrative played out. Things that were true on the Monday by the Tuesday weren't true. People that said they'd had a vaccine on the Monday, they was coughing their guts up by Wednesday. What are we supposed to believe other than our hearts and our own lying eyes? Complicated questions, and Matt Taibbi really helps me get to the bottom of them. If you don't subscribe to this channel yet, subscribe right now so you don't miss a single post. The only way to guarantee that, I've got to tell you, is turn on the notification bell. And if you want a super safety, that's the double condom method, I call it. You've got to sign up to my mailing list, and I'll tell you to do that at the end because I wouldn't want to assume of you that you'd want to know my innermost thoughts, come deeper with me on some of these topics. Shouldn't say condom and then come deeper that close together, should I? That's not the kind of language you want, is it? On this channel? Absolutely, it bloody well is. So have a look at Matt Taibbi. If you decide that you want to go on a deeper journey with me, you'll sign up to the mailing list at the end, but for God's sake, turn on the notification bell in case the algorithm's working against us. Let's spend a bit of time in the company of Matt Taibbi and work out what misinformation and disinformation actually mean. Misinformation and disinformation, these peculiar new portmanteaus. What's happening there? You know, when we talk about how censorship in journalism has changed from, like this is again from your writing, Matt, like the pre-Trump era, it was understood that reporters weren't supposed to avoid ugly or scary topics. We were supposed to dive right in a non-judgmental manner, like a doctor or a surgeon, and figure them out. Somewhere along the line, it became taboo to ask the usual why. And then from the first days of the invasion, I guess this is, you're talking about Ukraine again, the Times followed every other paper in cartoonizing the conflict as a standard Hitler versus baby seals showdown. And then, nice, well done, I like that. And I like that sort of selling jets like hot dogs at a baseball game is another good bit of writing from you, mate. And then, and how do we sort of pair that with the sort of real disinformation from people like the Clintons and the sort of establishment of this disinformation governance board? What are we seeing the advent of a new kind of censorship? Chomsky came on here and he said there's more censorship here, in your country, in the United States, than in sort of Soviet Russia. I was feeling like, my God, this dude's going to be the next one to be cancelled. Noam Chomsky's going to be right wing next. I mean, where do we go? Karl Marx is right wing.
I've seen that. I've seen people suggesting that he's right adjacent now, which is pretty funny considering that it's Noam Chomsky. But I talked to him about that too. He's adamant that the Ukraine war has brought about an unprecedented level of media control in the United States. I think that's true in my lifetime. Certainly, I wasn't around for the 50s when it was apparently worse, but you're not seeing any kind of reporting on what's really going on in Ukraine. If there's something that's an adverse result for the Ukrainian military, it just doesn't appear in our newspapers. Other kinds of information about things that are happening within the Ukrainian government or conflicts between Zelensky and the armed services, or things that are going on with the Azov battalion. We're not hearing about those either.
Well, how do you contrast that with a term like disinformation and misinformation? How do you see these neologisms being used to further support preferred narratives with, for example, the stuff that's gone on around the Clinton campaign?
When the corporate press makes mistakes, sometimes willfully, that's that's an error that maybe at best gets corrected a couple of years down the road, right? And we don't apologize for it. We don't call it misinformation. You know, I've frequently gotten in arguments with other journalists about this, saying that the problem with any kind of censorship regime is that the most damaging misinformation is always official, right? Like you think about the worst things, the worst lies that can be told. It's always something like the WMD episode in the early 2000s. There's not many things that an ordinary person can say online that's going to lead to 500,000 deaths and tens of trillions of dollars worth of sort of lost revenue. But the state can do that, right? Like officials can do that, and they do that all the time. They do it regularly, and that's why the censorship issue is so fraught, because if you automatically in any kind of censorship regime, somebody has to be responsible for deciding what the truth is and what it isn't. If that body is connected with the government, it just gives them a monopoly on lying, and that's what makes it automatically problematic. That's why you have to allow everything, because the only defense against government misinformation is the general public, and theoretically a vigorous free press, although we haven't had that so much. At least having some people ask some, like you asking some questions about things, it prevents the total saturation of official misinformation.
I feel like there are some simple and observable patterns. One being Julian Assange's observation that the function of government is to transfer public money into private hands. Viewed from this perspective, the Afghanistan war is not a failure, it's a success. Another being that there seems to be this simultaneous trend to increase the ability of powerful interests to lying, to quote you just a moment ago, giving the government a monopoly on lying, where ordinary individuals with a limited ability to impact anybody are being aggressively persecuted. I feel that, this sort of institutionalized hypocrisy it's terrifying. And a lot of the things I'm getting from our conversation today, Matt, around the removal of nuance, the sort of inability for people to, or the presumed inability of people to access and discern truth from fiction, to be presented with information, source material, as you said, and make a decision, is actually creating a type of stupidity, a kind of a dumb inertia. Like that we are becoming like nodes, just like the end point of this system that sort of barely needs us anymore. Once it was just the underclass, the people that were used to be required for industry and manufacture. Now they're being discarded. I remember in that film, The House I Live In, that dude that wrote The Wire saying, why can't people just be honest and say there's 20% of the population we don't need anymore? So we don't care if they're on meth. Don't matter. They don't need them. They can kill themselves now. We don't have a job for you, unless it's prison and like new forms of slavery. Then
Right.
8 cents an hour we use you. And like again, existentially, what I feel is that we're creating a sort of low hum despair where people don't feel mobilized or activated. The counterpoint, of course, is that it does afford the emergence of demagogic figures such as we've touched upon, and what and there are places where it's difficult to say this and other places where you'd be applauded for saying it. What sort of I find inspiring about the emergence of sort of bombastic populist figures is it demonstrates that so much territory has been ceded. So there is so little conversation about what could be done. Like, the kind of videos we make, like I find myself like, without this being even particularly my purpose, I find myself going, well, couldn't you just overnight ban people in Congress from owning shares in companies that they regulate? Couldn't you overnight end lobbying? Couldn't you immediately prevent the FDA receiving funding from the pharmaceutical companies that they regulate? Couldn't you prevent media companies receiving commercial sponsorship from companies that they are going to be required to report on? Wouldn't you ban them from passing up your information? And so, like, there is regulation. As some of my friends who are less, what do I want to say, say, cynical than me, and I'm a really optimistic person in some regards. They say that, the thing is, and I wonder where you stand on this, is that government, democracy, can do amazing things. It's perhaps the one thing that can be used to actually represent the people and responsibly represent their interests against these titans and Goliaths. But once you have this kind of corporate state alliance that we have in your country and mine, and not to say that it isn't potentially worse in Russia or China or whatever else, once you have that, then you have no reason to be optimistic about government. You have no reason to be optimistic about media. You have no reason to be optimistic about the miracles that have come out of commodity and capitalism and commerce. There's no doubt that there are some wonderful objects and gadgets have been created, but at such an expense. Yeah, I mean, I love some of this stuff, but it's hard. But I wonder how we revivify it. And do you think that, from our perspective, in our own way, as people that are interested in inquiry and telling stories, do you think that we're doing the right thing? Do you think we can do more? Do you think that we have to be more active? Do you think that we have to be almost more devout, more evangelical, more organized? What do you think, Matt?
Well, I think you're doing one of the most important things, which is to give people a space where they can think freely and not be under so much stress, and to be themselves, and to give them permission to relax and enjoy their lives, because that's what's being taken away from them, right? This constant panic has damaged people psychologically, and it's created a level of despair. I mean, you mentioned the thing about members of Congress trading shares in companies that they're voting on. One of the reasons that we have despair in this country is because occasionally we do fix stuff like that, and then people see years later that the same old thing is happening.
Well, what did you think? Do you feel a bit smarter now? Do you feel a bit better equipped to have the conversations you have to have when you live in this world, when you're fighting off the urge to conform or the pressure to conform? Well, continually being compelled, by the government, as hard as hell, you yell to ignore the mainstream media's yellow-bellied lacquering of claptrap and trash all the time. Wow, sometimes I want to dash, smash, grab, get my truth from somebody else, like you or me. Together we can create new rhythms, new cadences, new connections. That's what we're doing here. Please let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video with Matt. Give us a thumbs up. If you enjoyed this bit of content, why don't you have a look at one of these two bits of content? They're equally fantastic in my view. Sign up to that mailing list, turn on the notification bell, watch these two videos, but more important than any of that, please stay free.